Let's talk about prescription drugs, addiction, dependency, and side effects. Do you know what amputation and complex regional pain syndrome have in common? Pain, and the meds that go with it. I'm Stephanina, and today I'll be sharing my experience. Before my life got turned upside down, I was one of those people who never took meds. If I had a headache, I didn't even usually take Tylenol, figuring the discomfort would pass with time. When I gave birth to my 3 kids, I did so without painkillers. My philosophy was that all meds come with some degree of risk and potential side effects. I figured that even if the risk was small, it could be easily avoided by not taking the meds in the first place. Then life got complicated. When you're in a life or limb situation, you're sometimes forced to question how you used to do things. My foot was crippled and my doctors and I were already discussing amputation when a disease called complex regional pain syndrome set in. The short explanation is that CRPS affects the nerves, making your limb feel like it's being burned alive. It's usually triggered by a fracture, surgery, or other accident. CRPS is considered incurable and can spread through your body. It's the most painful of the chronic pain diseases and has been nicknamed the suicide disease. That's what I was up against. And while medications couldn't cure me, the hope was that they could take the edge off the pain and prevent the disease from spreading. Because at that point, the CRPS was spreading up my leg, dangerously close to my knee. For amputation, the cut line needed to be above the high water mark for the CRPS. Otherwise, I could end up legless and still have the same disease and the same potential for it to spread.
If you'd like more of this content, click like, subscribe, and click the bell.
If the CRPS got too high, then we would need to amputate above my knee. Losing that knee would be a big deal, so it was a tense situation. Enter the pain meds. It started with one med for nerve pain, then others were added on. The main medication was gabapentin. It made me feel drowsy and out of it, which makes it hard to live life. There were other side effects like nausea, constipation, and having a hard time remembering things. But the big problem was that my body seemed to adapt. Then the pain would resurge, and then the dose would need to be raised. This cycle of reemerging symptoms, increasing dosages, kept happening. Aside from prescription meds, I was also given frequent maxed out injections of ketamine. There's research that shows ketamine can help CRPS, but it also induces psychedelic trips and it made me ridiculously sick afterwards. I was not a fan. Between ketamine, prescription drugs, and sympathetic nerve blocks, we were able to temporarily push down the CRPS, giving us room to amputate. In case you're not aware, cutting off limbs hurts. The post-surgical pain was bad, and the doctors offered me opioid painkillers like Dilaudid. I think the pain meds might have helped a bit, but it was hard to tell because it fell far short of complete relief. Then the phantom pain began. Let me tell you, it was worse than the post-op pain.
I can't sleep. My phantom limb pain is just... it's doing a thing tonight. Stumpy is grumpy tonight.
Granted, everyone is different, but that's how it was for me. If you want more details, I have lots of videos that go more in depth about phantom pain, ketamine, CRPS, all that good stuff. And what do you think the doctors did when my phantom pain got intense? You guessed it, they gave me more meds. It's hard to adequately appreciate my situation without having lived through something similar. My leg was in pain because my foot had just been chopped off. The phantom pain felt like taser blasts, and there was no way I could sleep through any of that. I was in intense pain and hadn't slept for literal days. I suspect most people will accept medication if it's offered to them when they're truly desperate, or at least I did. I can't compare what the pain would have been like without medication, but I know that even with the meds, I experienced a lot of intense pain. And even with the sleep meds, I was hurting too much to sleep.
It's hard to keep my eyes open. I feel really drugged up. I'm like, I'd be asleep if I didn't hurt this much. So it's weird. So drugged up, I can't stay awake. I'm in too much pain to fall asleep.
With the passage of time, eventually I was able to get little bits of sleep here and there. And by a couple months post-amputation, the phantom pain was starting to improve. I wasn't seeing signs of CRPS in my residual limb, so it seemed that we'd successfully cut off the affected area. I wanted to get off the pain meds entirely, but found out it's a lot faster and easier to get on certain medications than to get off them. We had to take a slow and steady approach in order to avoid withdrawals. It was discouraging to still be dealing with side effects and feeling drugged up when I no longer felt a need for the medication. But at least there was an end in sight until disaster struck a second time. Do you know what's worse than getting an incurable disease? Getting it twice. When I was learning to walk on a prosthesis, I got a stress fracture in my remaining foot. After it healed, I tried walking again. It fractured again. Do you remember what disease can be sparked by fractures? You guessed it, complex regional pain syndrome. I hadn't finished weaning off the gabapentin and other post-amputation meds, and now we were in a fresh crisis. The CRPS was spreading aggressively, despite the meds I was already on, and quickly made it up to my knee. Having experienced both amputation and CRPS, I knew what my choice would be if push came to shove. If amputation was the only way to get free of CRPS, I preferred that over living with such an agonizing disease for the rest of my life. That didn't mean I was going down without a fight. Instead of celebrating milestones, when my 1-year anniversary came around, I was fighting to save my remaining leg. It was like deja vu, back to ketamine, nerve blocks, and heavy medications. My gabapentin dose was raised higher than ever. I was on a maxed out dose to the point that other doctors did a double take when they heard how much I was prescribed on a daily basis. But if your only leg is on the line, then you and your doctors are motivated to try everything to stop the spread of the disease and save your limb. Drastic times call for drastic measures. That was one of the darkest times of my life. I can't adequately describe the despair that sets in when you have such a painful disease with no hope of a cure and none of the medications can save you. On top of the pain and fear, I felt drugged up and nauseous. It was incredibly hard to focus, and I was so drowsy it was hard to function. When the side effects of one med got too intense, doctors sometimes prescribed more medications to counteract the first medication. Unfortunately, those medications also came with side effects. It was a vicious cycle. My doctors didn't dare take me off the meds that were causing the problems because the risk of CRPS spreading was too high. Before I knew it, I was on several strong medications while still trying to take care of my kids, despite being so thoroughly drugged up. The pain meds and muscle relaxants made me drowsy, so I was given stimulants to keep me awake. Those stimulants completely took away my hunger cues, to the point that I would go literal days without food and not even realize it. I had to start setting alarms to make sure I didn't starve myself. Medline Plus defines opioid addiction as a powerful compulsive urge to use opioid drugs, even when they are no longer required medically. I've experienced that type of urge with ketamine. Even though it's not an opioid, I didn't like it, and it isn't supposed to be addictive. Thankfully, the periodic urge for ketamine isn't too overwhelming, and I've successfully resisted it when it surfaces. But I hate that feeling, that pull towards something that I don't want to take. It's given me compassion for people with strong drug addictions. Strangely, I've never felt any sort of compulsion with the opioids I was given, so I don't feel like I ever became addicted to them. But I definitely saw signs of physical dependency. Anytime I got the stomach flu and couldn't get down my daily meds, I would go into withdrawals. Those were intense. I remember being drenched in sweat, my whole body aching, feverish, and shaking. And the longer it went on, the more nauseous I got, making it even harder to take my meds. More than once, I ended up in the ER during withdrawals. It was alarming how something as commonplace as the stomach flu could land me in the hospital. I felt trapped in a hopeless downward spiral, completely helpless and incapable of digging my way out of the pit into which I'd fallen. Then a miracle happened. On the other side of the world in Italy, a drug in the bisphosphonate family was being used to treat CRPS, and it was working. In a desperate attempt to save my leg, my incredible doctor got a hold of some bisphosphonates, specifically pamidronate, and set up a case study so he could administer the medication as an IV infusion. We put in the needles, started the pump running, crossed our fingers, and held our breath. It worked! Over the coming weeks, I had periodic infusions and the CRPS retreated. That was in 2022. It's now 2024. I no longer take bisphosphonates, but I'm still symptom-free.
This is so weird. My foot's like a normal color. It's not blotchy or red or gray or anything like that.
If you have CRPS and want to know more, I'll link a video. As an update to that video, I'll just add that my doctor said he's seen better results in patients who are able to have regular infusions over a few months, rather than patients who get a bunch of infusions in the space of a few days. The other update is that there's currently a supply chain issue, and it's hard to get pamidrone these days. Did this new drug come with its own side effects? Yep, but paradoxically, it was those side effects that helped me break free of my other pain medications. After bisphosphonate infusions, I experienced intense muscle aches and flu-like symptoms. Just like with the regular flu, I was throwing up too much to swallow my prescription medications. I couldn't tell whether I was in drug withdrawals because the symptoms from the bisphosphonate infusions were too similar to withdrawal symptoms. For a few days, I was miserable. Then it was over. As my brain fog cleared, I realized I hadn't taken my medications in several days. It can be dangerous to stop prescriptions cold turkey, and I'm definitely not recommending that you try that. It was unintentional in my case, but that didn't negate the possibility of serious consequences like seizures or dangerous drops in blood pressure from stopping so abruptly. So I called my pain management doc. After considering how many days had passed, he said that if I was going to have dangerous withdrawal symptoms, I probably would have had them by now. He said if I didn't want to take my meds again, I didn't have to, and he was supportive of that. I couldn't believe it. After so long of being on such heavy medications, fearing that I'd never get off, abruptly I was free. Without having even planned it, I was simply free. That felt like its own miracle, in addition to beating the CRPS.
Let's go.
And while life hasn't been perfect since then, I'm unspeakably grateful to be off prescription medications. As of today, I take vitamin supplements and get occasional insulin infusions, but I'm not on bisphosphonates or any other drug. It's amazing. Having been on this journey, I still believe what I did before. All medications come with potential risks. Some are small risks, others are large. The possibility of addiction and dependence is real, but it's equally true that medications can make life-changing differences. Antidepressant meds helped me through some dark times, and while I hated being dependent on so many prescription medications, they may have prevented the spread of the disease, and ultimately it was a drug that saved me. There is a time and a place for different treatments, and I'm not qualified to say when that is. My purpose today isn't to tell you whether or not to take medications or how to get off them. That's between you and your doctor. I'm just telling my story. If you'd like to share your story in the comments, it could help someone else going through challenging times. And whatever you're going through, hang in there. Sometimes life surprises us, even when we feel hopeless. There isn't always a miracle cure. Sometimes the miracle is simply the ability to keep going, but you're not alone, so don't give up. Hang in there, and I'll see you next time.